welcome back to Strange Brew MTG, your casual deck building channel for Magic the Gathering. I'm back here with another Commander deck tech for you, and this one definitely fits the description of a Strange Brew. At the helm of this deck are the two pirate partner commanders, Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator and Breeches Brazen Plunderer. Now, when you first look at these commanders' abilities, it seems like a straightforward strategy of fill your deck with a bunch of pirates and swing away your opponents to gain, treasures from Malcolm, or you can steal the top cards of your opponent's libraries with Breeches. And that's where this deck list becomes a little strange, because there are little to no actual pirates in this deck. If you take a second look at our commanders, it doesn't specify that it has to be combat damage that the pirates do, just so long as a pirate does damage. So everything in this deck is built around just exploiting that little bit of text right there. Now, full disclosure, the inspiration of this deck came from an EDH gameplay video by MTG Mudsta. If you haven't checked out his content, it's really great commander gameplay, and he narrates and goes through all the steps and phases. But there was a deck featured that kind of was built around this same theme, and I used it as the basis for this deck. Now, I leaned a little bit harder into these themes, and there's newer cards now since that video came out that work really, really well in this deck. Now, the goal of this deck is to turn creatures into pirates, but we're trying to get the most value out of our creatures that do damage either from an activated ability or a triggered ability, and the best ones do damage to all of our opponents at once. That way we can get the most value out of our commander's abilities. Now, a great creature in this deck that meets those requirements is Guttersnipe. It's 3 mana for a 2/2 goblin that reads, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Guttersnipe deals 2 damage to each opponent. So these are the exact kind of effects we're looking for, because as long as we turn him into a pirate, with Malcolm on board, every instant and sorcery we cast turns into treasure, which we can then use for more instant and sorceries and just keep dealing damage to all of our opponents at once. Some other great creatures we have in the deck that have this same static ability are Electrostatic Field and Firebrand Archer. She's great because she can trigger off of our enchantment spells and all of our artifact spells in the deck. Now, we do run 2 creatures with activated abilities that do this. Now, I did think they might be a little slow, just because you can't tap them right away unless they have haste, and then you have to make sure that you can untap them. But what they really are kind of fail-safes for when we don't have the right cards in hand. Depending on which commander we have out at the moment, sometimes we just need that extra boost of mana for a spell in our hand, and this can basically serve almost like a mana dork, dealing damage to our opponents. Or if we don't have anything to really trigger what we need, we can try to get it off the top of our opponent's library and roll the dice, so to speak. So you tap this with Breeches out. Hopefully you hit an instant or sorcery off the top of someone's library. You can cast it, untap Thermo Alchemist, tap him again, try again to find something. Same thing with Nettle Drone. He's just great value, especially if we have Breeches out. We may not have an artifact in our hand to untap him, so we'll just try to see if we can get anything off of the top of our opponent's libraries. The synergies there are a little more random. I always feel like I'm rolling the dice when I try to do that. And, a lot of opponents don't like when they take their stuff. So Malcolm is kind of more of the leader of this deck than Breeches is. Breeches is kind of if I'm lacking card draw or if I just am not getting the right things in my hand. But it is kind of cool to think of them as pseudo mana dorks that deal damage to our opponents and have the potential to give us 3 treasures at once. Another great static effect that we run in the deck comes from Immolation Shaman. He reads, whenever an opponent activates an ability of an artifact, creature, or land that isn't a mana ability, Immolation Shaman deals 1 damage to that player. This is cool because it makes our opponents think twice before they activate an ability, knowing that it'll either give me more treasures or exile the top card of their library. He works great with Breeches, and his second ability isn't even that irrelevant in the deck. There are times where we do have to swing in, so he can pump himself +3/+3 and give himself Menace, so it's actually pretty decent evasion against some decks. It's why I also put in Tectonic Giant. He's 4 mana and reads, whenever he attacks or becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, Either he deals 3 damage to each opponent, or exile the top 2 cards of your library, choose one of them. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card. I always like modal spells like this, just that give you more options. It's great that he triggers on attacks, so you get to choose whether he's dealing the damage or if you get some extra card advantage. Now, if you watch my deck tech with Kaidel and Nadir, I did talk about having infinite combos in the deck can sometimes just be beneficial to end a really long game. Now, I do have 2 infinite combos. After playing this deck a few times, I realized that it may be a bit higher on the power level than my other decks, just because it can go off out of nowhere. So again, just have that rule 0 convo with your table and just try to maybe know what you're going up against so that you don't overpower them, or just so that you know if it's going to be a little more casual what you can play. Now, the first infinite combo I have in the deck comes with Reckless Fireweaver. I kind of stumbled upon this one, but he reads, whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, he does 1 damage to each opponent. So if we have Malcolm out, and we have any way at all to turn Reckless Fireweaver into a pirate, as long as we deal 1 damage to any of our opponents, it starts a trigger of making a treasure and dealing damage and making more treasures until everyone is just dead at the table. People that have played against this deck multiple times know that if Reckless Fireweaver hits the board, he's kind of a kill-on-sight creature. The other infinite combo we have comes from one of our actual pirates in the deck. It's Glinthorn Buccaneer. He has haste, and he reads, whenever you discard a card, Glinthorn Buccaneer deals 1 damage to each opponent. And you can pay 1 in a red, discard a card, and draw a card, but activate this ability only if he is attacking. So with Malcolm out, if we have 3 opponents, we swing with Glinthorn Buccaneer, and then we activate the ability, and then once he deals the damage, we get 3 treasures, which allows us to activate the ability again and again. Basically, we can do as much damage as cards are in our library. So it's not exactly infinite, but it is a lot. He does pair well with wheel effects, though. We don't run a ton in the deck. We just pretty much run Windfall as our only wheel that we have, but it does pair well with Glinthorn Buccaneer. Another actual pirate we run in the deck is Emberwild Captain. He reads, when he enters the battlefield, you become the monarch, and whenever an opponent attacks you while you're the monarch, Emberwild Captain deals damage to that player equal to the number of cards in their hand. Now, Emberwild Captain and Glinthorn Buccaneer are pretty much the only pirates that I found that have a static damage ability built into them. That's why he's in the deck. But I also just really like adding Monarch to games. It encourages your opponents to attack, which is nice because then it just can speed up the game a little bit. And the last actual pirate I run in the deck is Siren Stormtamer. He's just really great protection and just happens to be a pirate. He's super cost efficient. You only have to pay 1 mana, sack him, counter target spell or ability that targets you or a creature you control. I just think his ability has a lot of versatility. Counters from your hand can only really stop stuff that goes on the stack, while Siren Stormtamer's ability can counter activated abilities of creatures or even planeswalkers. It was just kind of a bonus that he happened to be a pirate as well. So like I said, sometimes we do have to swing with creatures in this deck, but a lot of our creatures are so valuable to us that I wanted to put something in that could maybe make us a bunch of creatures with evasion, which is why I put in Murmuring Mystic. 3 and a blue, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 blue bird illusion creature token with flying. There is a card, Young Pyromancer. I was thinking about putting that in here just because it is more mana efficient, at only 2 mana, but it creates 1/1s that don't fly. In most multiplayer commander games I've seen, there's always at least one player who just doesn't have a ton of flyers, and you're able to get by. And creating a bunch of flying tokens is pretty decent evasion. If we could turn them into pirates, it's even better. Now, I wanted to talk about the 3 best pirates in this deck. It's Niv Mizzet the Firemind, Niv Mizzet Perun, and Niv Mizzet Draco Genius. These dragon wizards make the best pirates in the deck, just because all of them do damage to our opponents and all of them draw us cards in some way or another. Now, if you pair Niv Mizzet the Firemind and Niv Mizzet Perun with a card like Curiosity or a card like Ophidian Eye, both of which read, whenever enchanted creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. I guess that's just another infinite combo in this deck that I kind of forgot about. And maybe this deck is more powerful than I thought. But oh well. There's still great cards in the deck. Both enchantments on any of our damage-dealing creatures are just great card draw for us. Same goes for Sigil of Sleep. It's just great removal for our opponent's creatures. If we put it on something that deals damage to all of them at once, we get to return a creature from each of them. Again, it has that same line of text where it doesn't matter if it's combat damage, the creature just needs to deal damage. Now, finally, how we're going to turn all of these creatures into pirates. Two of the weirder creatures in Magic are Amoeboid Changeling and Image Crafter. Image Crafter, you get to choose the creature type other than Legend or Wall and turn a target creature's type that type until end of turn. And Amoeboid Changeling just gives a creature all creature types. So it's a pirate, it's a bear, it's a fairy, it's pretty much everything. Because again, our commander just cares that it's a pirate. So all creature types still counts as a pirate. We also run Captain's Hook, which is a 3-mana equipment. When it's equipped, it turns a creature into a pirate. But it also gives it Menace, which is great evasion for those rare times where we do actually have to attack. It does have a downside of whenever Captain's Hook becomes unattached from a permanent, destroy that permanent. But if we're taking Captain's Hook off one of our creatures and putting it onto another, it's usually worth it to be putting it on, say, like a Niv Mizzet or something that we really want to be a pirate over something else. Another pretty interesting card in Magic is Trickery Charm. It's only 1 blue, instant, and it's modal, so you could either choose one, target creature gains flying until end of turn, or target creature's type becomes the creature type of your choice until end of turn, or look at the top 4 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. Again, it's just good to have some sort of flexibility. Sometimes giving a creature flying can actually become relevant if we don't have any flyers, and sometimes rearranging the top 4 of our library is good in case we're maybe not meeting land drops. So Trickery Charm is just really good in the deck to turn our stuff into pirates, but it also helps us out in other ways if we need it. We also run Wings of Velis Vale and Blades of Velis Vale. The Wings can turn one target creature base power and toughness 4/4 and give it all creature types and flying until end of turn. And Blades of Velis Vale, up to 2 target creatures, each get +2/+0 and gain all creature types until end of turn. These are good in the situations where we have to swing, but they are instants, so we gain value off of like our Firebrand Archer and our Gutter Snipe and stuff like that. Another great pirate maker is Unnatural Selection. It's an enchantment, so it stays out on the field, and you just got to pay 1, choose a creature type other than Wall, and target creature becomes that type until end of turn. This is one of the better pirate makers I think I have in the deck, just because as long as it stays out on the field, even though the effect lasts only till end of turn, we can activate it on our opponent's turns. Another cool card that actually works around that is Artificial Evolution. It's a blue instant that turns something into another creature type, but it reads at the end that this effect does not end at end of turn. So for the rest of the game, for as long as you have that creature out, it's a pirate. We also run Arcane Adaptation and Xenograph. These are great just because they turn all of our creatures into pirates, even before we cast them. Then we also run the newer card, Maskwood Nexus. This is one that, again, gives our creatures all creature types. It does have an ability to make tokens, which can become relevant sometimes if we need blockers or whatever. So now, since we're in red and blue, we are running like a bunch of instants and sorceries, and they do synergize with all of our damage makers. But that's why we do run a Mystical Tutor and a Merchant Scroll. Another underrated tutor, though, I think, is Muddle the Mixture with its Transmute cost. Transmute is just a really great ability that I wish Magic would explore a little bit more. Cards with Transmute costs is you just pay the Transmute cost, discard that card, and then search your library for a card with the same CMC or mana value as that card. And Muddle the Mixture, there's a lot of good targets for it to go get out of our deck. If we need removal, it can go get Reality Shift. If we need Recursion, it can go get Flood of Recollection. Or if we need a board wipe, it can get our Cyclonic Rift. And a few of our pirate-making cards are 2 CMC as well. Now, 2 cards that synergize a little bit more with our commanders, Felwar Stone as well as Exotic Orchard in the deck. They produce mana that our opponents can produce, because if we steal anything off of Breeches from the top of our opponent's library, it may have like an activated ability of a color we don't run in our deck. And then another card that has great synergy with Malcolm is Treasure Map. It's a 2-mana artifact that reads, pay 1, tap, scry 1, and put a landmark counter on Treasure Map. Then if there are 3 more landmark counters on it, remove those counters and transform Treasure Map and make you 3 treasures. And then when it's a land, it's Treasure Coat, and it has the ability to tap and add colorless mana, or tap, sacrifice a treasure, and draw a card. So this synergizes with all the treasures we make off of Malcolm. It also gives us that card advantage when we scry, and also helps us a little bit out with ramping as well. Now again, with this deck tech, I didn't go through every single card on the list, but the list is available in the description. It's kind of funny though, now going through it, I think this deck is a little bit more powerful than I even thought it was. But this deck is just really fun. It has a lot of weird cards that, a lot of newer players haven't seen. Being able to turn stuff into pirates is something I think is very unique. I have seen other deck lists that are kind of built this way, but I feel like they didn't really lean as far into the whole theme as I did on this version. They didn't have any Niv Mizzets. A lot of them are just pingers. One creature that I saw that was on like both deck lists was Blister Spit Goblin, and I think it's kind of like an example of how I would choose some creatures over others when I'm building decks. For instance, like that creature is only 1 mana, but you do have to pay into its tap ability. Comparing it to like something similar like Thermo Alchemist, I like Thermo Alchemist a little bit better because maybe I'm just paying that 1 mana as its cost, and then from then on out, all I have to do is tap him. Now, I know that there are some cards in this deck that could probably be swapped out for either budget reasons, or I can take some of the infinite combos out. But yeah, just let me know what you think of this deck. If you think it looks fun, or maybe I should take those infinite combos out. If there are any suggestions about replacing some of the cards. I may do an updated version of this deck, or maybe even a more budget version of this deck. I'm not sure yet. I just think this is a cool way to build around tribal where it's not really tribal at all. If you're interested in building it, again, the deck list is down below. And I guess that's all I got for you guys now. Thanks again. I keep forgetting to say subscribe and hit all the buttons and whatnot. So make sure you do all that. Thanks again for tuning in, though. Have a good day.